Hey, quick question. Have you ever gone shopping for CBD and seen these three terms, full spectrum, broad spectrum, and CBD isolate, and thought, what does any of that actually mean? Because here's the problem. Those words get thrown around all over the CBD industry, but most companies never really explain them. And sometimes what's actually inside the bottle may be very different from what you think you're buying. So today, we're going to fix that. No hype, no miracle cures, just plant chemistry and a little common sense. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand the difference between full spectrum, broad spectrum, and CBD isolate. And more importantly, you'll know what questions to ask the next time somebody puts the words full spectrum on a bottle. Let's get to it. First, we need to clear something up. There's not one universally standardized definition requiring every CBD company to use the term full spectrum in the same exact way. These are commonly used industry terms. Generally speaking, a full spectrum hemp extract is an extract intended to retain CBD along with a broader range of naturally occurring compounds found in the hemp plant. That can include cannabinoids such as CBDA, CBD, CBG, CBC, CBDV, CBN, and naturally occurring trace amounts of THC. Depending on the genetics and the extraction process, the extract may also retain various amounts of terpenes, flavonoids, and lipids, and other natural occurring plant constituents. But I want to stop right there because this is where marketing can get ahead of reality. Full spectrum does not mean every single molecule that existed in the living hemp plant is still sitting inside that bottle. That would be an unrealistic definition because when you get down to it, extraction changes things. Heat changes things. Time changes things. Decarboxylation changes things. Filtration changes things. Storage changes things. And different extraction methods can preserve different parts of the plant's original chemical profile to different degrees. So when I use the term full spectrum, I'm talking about an extract intended to preserve a broader natural cannabinoid and plant compound profile, rather than reducing the product down to primarily one purified cannabinoid. That distinction matters. Remember the cannabinoid rabbit hole? If you watched my last video, we went down what I call the cannabinoid rabbit hole. Most people know CBD and THC, maybe CBG, but cannabis researchers have identified a much larger family of cannabinoids and cannabinoid-related compounds. We talked about CBD, CBDA, CBG, CBGA, CBC, CBCA, CBDV, CBDVA, CBGV, CBCV, THCV, THCVA, CBN, CBL, CBE, CBT, and other minor compounds researchers continue to characterize. Now, does every hemp plant contain meaningful concentrations of every one of those? No, absolutely not. And that's important. Genetics matter, plant maturity matters, environment matters, harvest timing matters, processing matters, storage matters, and some cannabinoids may only exist in extremely small trace concentrations. But that video established something really important. CBD dominant does not mean CBD only. So now, let's take the plant and make an extract. That's where full spectrum, broad spectrum, and isolate start going in very different directions. When it comes to full spectrum, let me give you an analogy. Think of CBD as the lead singer of a band. CBD gets its name on the marquee. CBD gets most of the attention. It's the cannabinoid almost everybody recognizes. But behind that lead singer, there's a band. CBDA, CBG, CBC, CBDV, other minor cannabinoids, terpenes, and other naturally occurring plant compounds. With a properly made full spectrum hemp extract, the band is still on stage. Now, not necessarily every original musician, and not necessarily in exactly the same proportions that existed in the living plant, but we've preserved a broader chemical profile. And that is the basis of the idea behind full spectrum. What is broad spectrum? Now let's take that full spectrum hemp extract and process it down further. With broad spectrum CBD products, the goal is generally to retain multiple cannabinoids and potentially other plant compounds while intentionally removing THC, or reducing it to a very low, non-detectable level under the testing method being used. So broad spectrum is not necessarily CBD by itself. A broad spectrum product might still contain things like CBD, CBG, CBC, CBDV, terpenes, and other compounds, but THC has generally been intentionally removed or substantially reduced. And think about our band again. The band is still playing, but somebody has intentionally removed one of the musicians. And depending on how that product was processed, Some other parts of the original chemical profile may have changed along the way too. And that's why two different products can both say broad spectrum and still have very different cannabinoid profiles. Then there's CBD isolate. Now, let's keep refining and separating until what we're primarily left with is CBD, highly purified cannabidiol. That is CBD isolate. And I want to make something very clear. CBD isolate is not fake CBD. The molecule is cannabidiol. CBD is CBD, but CBD isolate is a very different product from full spectrum hemp extract. Remember the band? With CBD isolate, we took the lead singer, removed the drummer, the guitar player, the bass player, the backup singers, and everybody else, and put that lead singer alone under the spotlight. You still have the singer, but you no longer have the band. Does full spectrum means stronger? Now we get to one of the biggest misconceptions. People will sometimes say full spectrum is stronger, but that statement is too simplistic. Stronger how? More CBD? Not necessarily. CBD isolate can actually have a much higher percentage of CBD than full spectrum extract. It doesn't have the limitation on it anymore of the THC. So remember this, full spectrum is not a potency measurement. Full spectrum describes composition. You could have a full spectrum product containing 10 milligrams of CBD per serving, or 25 milligrams, or something completely different. The words full spectrum do not tell you how concentrated the CBD is. They tell you something about what else is present alongside the CBD. Those are two completely different questions. Does full spectrum mean high THC? No, that's another misconception. Full spectrum does not automatically mean high THC. CBD-dominant hemp can naturally contain small amounts of THC while remaining completely CBD-dominant. THC can be a naturally occurring compound of that cannabinoid profile without being the dominant cannabinoid. And that takes us right back to something I've talked about throughout this series. CBD-dominant does not mean THC-free, and trace THC does not suddenly make THC the dominant cannabinoid. The entire cannabinoid profile matters. Of course, laws governing hemp and THC can vary depending on where you live, and those regulations can change. That's a legal definition. What I'm explaining here is the chemistry of the plant and the extract. What about the entourage effect? Now, we need to talk about one of the most heavily marketed phrases in cannabis, the entourage effect. The basic idea is that cannabinoids and other compounds in cannabis may interact in ways that produce biological effects different from one isolated compound acting alone. That is a legitimate scientific question, and researchers continue to study it. It does seem that the sum of all the cannabinoids together is greater than the parts. So how do you know who to trust? Now this is where I think customers sometimes make a mistake. People hear third-party lab tested, and they think that settles everything. Lab testing is important. A certificate of analysis can help verify things like cannabinoid concentrations and whether the product tested resembles what the label claims. But a laboratory report is only part of the picture. A piece of paper doesn't tell you everything about the company behind the bottle. How long have they been doing this? Do they have a reputation in the industry? Do they stand behind their products? Are they transparent about where their hemp came from? Do they understand the plant? Or do they simply buy an ingredient and put their label on it? Have they been producing consistent products year after year? And when customers have questions, is there actually somebody knowledgeable there to answer them? That matters. Now, let me be fair. New does not automatically mean bad, and expensive does not automatically mean good. But I would never choose something I'm putting in my body based only on who has the biggest milligram number for the cheapest price, especially with CBD. Sometimes the bargain that looks great on the internet is only a bargain because you don't know what was removed, where the ingredients come from, how the product was made, or who was standing behind it. So yes, look at the lab report, but also look at the reputation behind the report. Experience matters, consistency matters, transparency matters, and trust is earned over time. Full spectrum and whole plant are not the same thing. There's another distinction I want you to understand. People sometimes use the terms whole plant and full spectrum as though they mean the same thing. They don't. Whole plant describes what parts of the plant were used to make the extract. A whole plant extraction may include the flower, leaves, stems, stalks, and other aerial plant material. That is not how I make my extracts. We use the bloom. the cannabinoid and terpene-rich flower of the hemp plant. We don't grind up the entire hemp plant and throw everything into the extraction process. We are bloom only. Now, full spectrum means something completely different. Full spectrum describes the cannabinoid profile of the finished extract. It means the extract retains a spectrum of naturally occurring cannabinoids rather than being reduced to a single isolated cannabinoid like CBD. So remember it this way. Whole plant tells you what plant material went in. Full spectrum tells you what cannabinoid profile came out. An extract can be full spectrum without being whole plant. And in our case, that is exactly what I want. Bloom only extraction, full spectrum cannabinoid profile. Because when you're making a premium hemp extract, the goal isn't to extract every part of the plant. The goal is to start with the part of the plant containing the compounds you actually want and preserve much of that naturally occurring chemistry as possible. That's a much more accurate description of what we do. This is where my own philosophy comes in. Now I want to separate something. Everything up to this point has been explaining terminology, plant chemistry, and how these different extracts are made. The next part is my perspective based on my own experience working with hemp. And for me, this has always been personal. I didn't get into the hemp industry because CBD became popular. I got into this industry because of my son. I wanted families like mine, families looking for hemp-derived products for their children, to have access to something that was reputable, consistent, and made to a high standard. That responsibility shaped the way I approached this industry from the very beginning. Because when you're making a product that a parent may choose to give their child, you don't approach it like you're chasing the latest trend. You approach it with a completely different level of responsibility. I've spent more than a decade working hands-on with CBD-dominant hemp, growing it, harvesting it, extracting it, testing it, and manufacturing products from it. And my philosophy has always been pretty simple. Why grow a chemically complex plant just to throw most of its natural chemistry away? When I start with CBD-dominant hemp, I want the resulting extract to reflect the plant's naturally occurring chemical profile as faithfully as the extraction process can reasonably preserve it. CBDA were present, CBG, CBC, CBDV, naturally occurring THC, terpenes, and other plant constituents where they are retained. Not because I'm going to tell you every molecule treats or cures something. I'm not. But because that is the chemistry the plant naturally produced. And to me, if you're going to start with a plant that produces this incredibly complex mixture of cannabinoids and other compounds, there should be a very good reason before you start stripping that chemistry away. So here's the verdict. What does full spectrum actually mean? It does not mean the strongest CBD. It does not mean high THC. And it does not mean every single compound from the living plant has been magically preserved. Generally, full spectrum refers to hemp extract containing CBD along with a broader range of naturally occurring cannabinoids and other retained plant compounds, including trace THC. Broad spectrum generally retains multiple cannabinoids and compounds, while THC has been intentionally removed or substantially reduced. And CBD isolate is highly purified CBD separated from most of the rest of the natural hemp chemistry. So, remember the band? CBD isolate is the lead singer standing alone. Broad spectrum keeps part of the band together, and full spectrum attempts to keep the broader band on stage. But when you choose a product, just don't look at the marquee. Look at who built the stage. How long have they been there? What is their reputation? Do they understand what they're making? Are they transparent? Do they stand behind it? Because anybody can print full spectrum on a label. Trust takes longer to build. I'm Bill Polyniak, and my goal with these videos is simple. Teach you enough about hemp that you don't have to rely on somebody's marketing department to tell you what you're buying. If you learned something today, subscribe and share this with a friend, because we've still got a lot more hemp myths and a lot more plant science to talk about. I'll see you on the next one.